Coming up on today's show.
Just repurposing the layout of a house. What once was a dining room, maybe that's going to work well for a sitting area or even a bedroom.
Because they might be overwhelmed thinking, how can I do this? But
paperwork can take a really long time. So I work with people to try to break that down.
Organizing Seniors Part 2 today on Keeping You Organized. Hello, welcome to Keeping You Organized. Today we are going to continue a discussion from last episode on organizing seniors where we're looking at these different scenarios of how to help seniors through the process of organizing themselves, whether they're downsizing or maybe just trying to declutter and get their existing space more livable for their stage of life. And joining us again is Joanna Laws from Smooth Transitions Houston. Joanna, welcome back to Keeping You Organized.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's kind of recap a little bit. In the last episode, we talked first quite a bit about downsizing, which is someone's going to move out of their existing space into a new space and needs to just have less stuff. And I encourage people to go back and listen or watch that episode because there's some great tips in there. Then we just started this concept of, well, I want to stay in my same place, but I know either I need to reconfigure or I know I need less stuff. And so let's kind of pick up, maybe recap a little bit on what we talked about, and then let's move into some more of the tips on how to deal with someone who's in that situation.
Sure. The aging in place is, I think, going to become even more common as people want to stay in their homes and they have to downsize and declutter, perhaps because they've had mobility issues or other physical issues where maybe their reach isn't as much as it used to be, or they just want to try to make their home safe to avoid having to lean down or get on a ladder to reach things, because falls are such a huge thing to be aware of as we age, but especially for senior citizens. So that's really important to make things safe for this house.
Now, when you work with seniors, do you go in and maybe recommend specific, I don't want to call them tools, but things they can use, like, certain bars that you might put on walls or some things that will help them in some of those situations?
Absolutely. And I will make a recommendation. I'm not a safety expert. I can do the general items, but I would definitely refer that part out as far as grab bars and things like that. But I do make people aware that, hey, maybe if you want to think about adding this, as you've got to step down to the garage or step down off a patio, you might consider this. And then I'll have a specialist come in. But as far as just reaching for their things, those are things that I can definitely help with.
Now, it makes sense that someone would want to have less stuff. What are some of the typical things that people part with? And maybe on the other side, what are things that are still kind of like, I still need these things, and how do you kind of maybe sort those into two categories to help them understand, living forward with less stuff?
Right. Things that people tend to want to get rid of, that list isn't very long, but maybe things like lawn equipment, ladders, things that they know they're not going to use anymore, bigger, maybe entertaining kind of things if they're not having people over as much as they used to, some auto accessories, things like that. I think tools and things that people aren't going to generally use, those things have less of an emotional attachment, so it's a little bit easier for people to let those things go. And then, working down to what people want to keep. Of course, they want to almost always keep their pictures and photos, artwork, things like that. And that's a little bit more challenging to deal with people because you're dealing with the emotional side of it. So I try to break it down into what are things going to be used for if they've got a purpose, and then the things that people want to keep just for aesthetic. So I usually try to start with those two things.
Now, if someone has a house that, let's say, has 2 levels, but they want to stay in that house, do you kind of get into some suggestions about, okay, we could take this study down here and make this into a bedroom, or kind of relaying out maybe the furniture and that kind of thing? Would that fall under some of the kinds of things you do?
Absolutely. I have many clients who basically don't use their upstairs. Their upstairs is only used for visitors when they have family, grandchildren. So we'll turn the upstairs into a playroom and move even the master bedroom. If it was located upstairs, we will relocate that downstairs. So we do a lot of rearranging of furniture and just repurposing the layout of a house. What once was a dining room, maybe that's going to work well for a sitting area or even a bedroom. Sometimes we'll do that. Absolutely.
Okay, that's common. Is there anything else on this living in the same place concept that we're maybe not, we haven't touched on yet that could kind of help us understand what someone has to do? Because they might be overwhelmed thinking, how can I do this? But are there any other pieces that we haven't talked about yet?
I think that one thing is paperwork and dealing with old files and things like that. That's a really common situation that I run into, and something that people dread doing because it's tedious. It can be very boring, whereas it's fun to look at pictures and mementos and things like that. Paperwork can take a really long time. So I work with people to try to break that down. And it can also be a huge space hog in a house. So that's something that we usually deal with. And I will usually ask the children of seniors or other family members to come and help and assist with that rather than me watching somebody go through things.
Yeah.
But I'll give them some strategies.
I remember when we were going through our house with my parents, and they had the National Geographic magazine. I don't even know if they have that anymore.
But, oh yeah, they do.
But it was like, I don't know, 30 years of subscription. Because they were so nice and they had great pictures, and they could never throw that away. But like you said, they're kind of a space hog. I mean, there was several huge boxes of just that magazine. And
absolutely.
What do you do with something like that?
Publications like National Geographic, TV Guide, Life Magazine, those are things I run into, very common things. I have worked with whole rooms full. They're basically libraries of just publications because people think they're going to be worth something. Oh, I've saved every TV Guide or New York Times Sunday paper from 1940, whatever, and I hate to tell people, but they're really not worth anything. There are people who will collect those. There are some people out there, but the cost of shipping, as you imagine, can be really, really high. So we just usually donate them to local libraries, but libraries are not taking just anything anymore. Some of them are also very particular. Yeah, there are some other places that will take the National Geographics, but the other stuff just has to go in the recycle bin.
Yeah. Oh, and that's very hard for someone to do.
It is.
Well, listen, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to talk a little bit about the decision-making process, because all these scenarios that we're talking about involve making a decision, and that's, I know, difficult for seniors. So we'll do that when we come back. We're with Joanna Laws from Smooth Transitions Houston, talking about organizing seniors, and we'll be right back. Now, there's a place just for you. Life can be busy, and you still have to keep it all together. That's why you like to be organized and in control. Introducing MyOrganized.life, a special place where you can get ideas and solutions to organize what's important to you, your important papers, your important decisions, your important life events. We show you the ideas and products to stay organized in your life. See what's new. Stop by and say hello. Visit us at any time at www.myorganized.life. It's just for you. MyOrganized.life by Smead. Find us at www.myorganized.life. MyOrganized.life. We're back now on Keeping You Organized, talking about organizing seniors, and we've touched a lot of scenarios over this episode and the one before. But one common theme is, how do you work with a senior to make a decision on whether to keep something or to let it go? And Joanna Laws, Smooth Transition Houston, that's a mouthful. Let's talk about that decision-making process and maybe kind of what goes through your mind as the objective person and in dealing with a senior who is trying to make decisions on what to keep and what to let go of.
Right. It's difficult. Sometimes I walk in and just difficult from seeing how someone might be living with a lot of clutter where I know that they're struggling, or it may be a safety issue. So it's a fine line when I see a bunch of mail that I know has probably not been opened for months and just wanting to pick that up and throw it away, versus, telling someone I can't just come in and throw it away. So it's a fine line of saying, this isn't practical, to, hey, I understand you have an emotional attachment to this. And a lot of people are paper pilers. They might say they're hoarders, but they're not. They put off going through their mail like we all tend to do. And it's just really important to start a little bit at a time with things like that, and going through and making the decision, coming in and saying, okay, what might be trash? Well, if someone says, that's an old coupon, but this place takes expired coupons. Well, we need to set a threshold then. We need to say, okay, we're going to throw away things older than coupons older than 2015, something like that. And we'll set a rule. And once we agree on that, it makes it a lot easier, and it's a lot faster to start going through papers. I have a client right now who has a lot of paper, and it's been a real struggle. And I've actually learned a whole lot about the decision-making process and how difficult it can be for people. But she's starting to let go of things, and that's good, because you can literally physically see the difference sometimes in people. They start feeling a lot better when they start getting those things sorted out.
Yeah, let's talk about maybe a typical client and in any of these scenarios, and what they might expect. How much time do they need to put into this? And I know it's going to vary, but on average, is it 10 hours, 100 hours? I mean, how would you, just to help people understand that process?
Sure. It's hard to say typical, but a typical scenario, if someone's at a point where they're really ready to move, and a lot of times people are calling me because they have to move. And so we have to get it done in a certain amount of time. It really depends on how much the client, the senior, can assist me and where they are in their decision-making process. But a common scenario might be, with a senior, we have to look at, what's the best time of day, limited hours, probably say 3 or 4 sessions of 4 to 6 hours for a large home, for someone who's really needing to downsize and get to a place where they can move into a 1 or 2 bedroom community apartment. And, a bigger home, if there's lots of paper and tons of stacks, it's going to take longer.
Right.
Yeah, but I always give people homework to do too, so they can do things on their own.
Good. And I'm sure if people either call you or connect with you through your website, that they can maybe get an assessment up front before you even start working, just to get a general feel for what it might take to have someone help them.
Absolutely. When people hear, everybody wants to know what it's going to cost, understandably. Right. And once I see, I do a complimentary consultation. Once I see the scope of work, we can work with almost any budget. It might not be me being there the whole time, but we can do that for sure.
Awesome. Well, while we're on that subject, how do people get a hold of you? What's your website and your phone number if you want? And we can wrap up this podcast.
Great. It's www.smoothtransitionskwhouston.com. It stands for kingwoodhouston.com. And my number is 832-651-8660. And I encourage anybody, even if you're out of town or out of the area, to let me know if you have any questions. I'd be happy to help.
Great. Well, Joanna, this has been a great 2-part program. And again, if people haven't seen or listened to the first part, I encourage them to go back and do that, because I think everyone either is getting into this stage or has to deal with someone who's in this stage. And it's good to kind of have some guidelines to work with. So thanks for your debut performance here on Keeping You Organized.
Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it.
Great. Well, folks, that wraps up this episode. Just some things coming up. We're approaching our 200th episode of this show, 5th season, and we got some surprises for you. We've got a new set coming, and we're going to be doing some live daily things that are happening. So keep tuned, and we'll also be doing the regular weekly podcast as well. So just make sure you subscribe at iTunes or YouTube or wherever you happen to get to this show, and then we'll see you next time on Keeping You Organized.